Okay folks, in the world of aviation, detailed and comprehensive pre-flight planning is absolutely essential for the safety and commercial efficiency of any flight. Certainly in the world of model railways, I believe it's very important also for getting the most out of your layouts and certainly avoiding future potential problems. Hello folks, Paul here, UK Rails and More. Hope you're all keeping safe and well. The weather in the UK isn't so great today, so it's certainly not garden running weather. So what I thought I'd do is something a little bit different and give you a bit of an insight into the way I plan the layout. The layout I'm speaking of is the modular layout that I'm going to start work on the first module later this month. So if you like the sound of that, my plan is I'll go through some of my thoughts and the processes as you see in front of you there. Also do a bit of garden running highlights in between, similar to the last video, and maybe discuss just a bit of other stuff as well. So if you like the sound of that, please give it a thumbs up. You know what I'm going to say next. Kettle's on, folks, and then we'll bring you back for more. Okay, bye for now. Okay folks, welcome back. Nice cup of tea there, ready for action. Okay, so let's look at the plan. Okay, so for the first of all, I've done a video on planning, which covers the overall requirement of what I'm looking to get out of this layout. So please check that out, it'll give you the full details, okay? What I'm trying to do with this layout is build a modular layout, okay? So what that means is I'm going to be constructing individual modules covering certain scenes, okay? So a rural scene, a TMD scene, a preservation railway scene, a river scene and other scenic scenes, okay? So what I'm going to be looking at doing is really working out how I'm going to put those scenes together. Once they have been completed, I'm going to do them individually, some from pretty much from start to finish. And then the idea is that they will eventually come together to form a large loft layout. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to just talk about a little bit was planning. Now, I'm not talking about the track planning, but when you're planning any kind of layouts, I always think it's good to give yourself plenty of time. So some of the plans for this layout I'd started back 2 or 3 months ago, putting thoughts down on paper. But this again is just really looking at some of the modules. The real benefit of giving yourself plenty of time to plan is that I find that your plan certainly will change as you go along the way. You'll encounter issues with it, you'll encounter little problems, and I always think it's good to give yourself plenty of time so you can just iron out a lot of those problems. And the other thing, of course, is enjoy the planning. It's a really essential phase of the layout, really. So it's always good to do that and get the most out of it. A quick tip I've found with planning is you will find days where you start putting things together and you just encounter nothing but problems. If you're getting like that or something's not working correctly, I find it's best just to leave it, go away, come back to it, and sometimes you can have completely fresh ideas. So that's well worth bearing in mind. Okay folks, so the first area I want to just have a look at is space requirements and limitations, baseboards and also scale. So what that is really, as I start thinking about how much space have I got. Now, if I've got a loft that I can use, then obviously that's going to give us a real nice amount of space to play with. But there may be individual limitations in terms of access. So for instance, if I'm building the layout, as in this case, not in situ, then I need to be mindful of being able to get the individual baseboards, the individual modules into the loft. Okay, so that's one factor I need to think of. Also then the baseboards, so the size of them. I'm looking at, for this layout, doing a combination really of, majority will be 2 foot by 4 foot baseboards, because that's a good size width-wise for getting into a loft hatch, and also it's quite a good length to work with as well. I will be doing a separate video on the actual individual baseboards and how I construct those as soon as materials arrive towards the end of this month. The other thing, of course, to factor in is the scale that you're going to be using. So are you going to have the amount of room to do what you want to achieve in the scale that you're thinking of using? So is that going to be a limitation? Certainly looking on YouTube, there's some brilliant layouts out there that have been made with incredible detail, really, that are very small areas, which is always impressive. So it doesn't need to be a hindrance. It's just that you need to sort of certainly think about that depending on what project you're going for. For this, I think double O gauge is going to be a good one, because I've got, as I say, I'm not too limited by room, and it should give us plenty of scope for building some nice scenes on these different baseboards. Okay, so the next factor I've written down to think about is cost. Okay, so again, that's something that can be as reasonably priced or as expensive as you wish to make it. So basically, with this layout, I think one of the good advantages of it that I've not really thought of before with some of the other layouts I've constructed is that you have the option, because it's going to be built in modules, of basically spreading the cost out a bit. So it's not like some layouts where you may be building the full thing all in one go, or you're laying all the track in one go first of all. As long as I've got an idea of how things are going to pan out, I can just sort of basically build one particular scene. Okay, so I can do that, and that will help kind of spread the costs if you wish to take a bit more time over it. Okay, so before I move on to the next section, which is running lines, okay, I'll just explain a little bit more about what I've done here. Basically, I've just got a jotter. I know there's various bits of brilliant track planning software, but I'm not looking at the track plan as such at this stage, or certainly not the detailed track plan. What I'm looking at is basically these are going to be 2 foot by 4 foot baseboards, these individual sections. And if you can see there, I've coloured some of them green. That represents that they may be a predominantly scenic section. And then I may also have darker areas like this, which is a non-scenic situation or a scenic break situation. Now, this is by no means the full plan at all. This is just really to give an example of some of the things I'm thinking about. So whether I've got a scenic section running directly onto a scenic section where I can bring a nice curve round, or whether I've got an area where it may be too tight a curve than I want to use, or I want to use this as one scene and that as another type of area. Then I'll also construct baseboards that will basically be non-scenic, that all their purpose is running track. There may not be at, it may be a tighter gradient or radius, I should say, than I want to visually see. But that's all that's going to be. And then this is just ideas. So if I wanted a baseboard that was at an angle there, I could make a non-scenic section that I'd put in here. If I wanted to have a scenic section here and then another scenic section, I could also run non-scenic basic parts that are just going to carry the track bed. That's all they're going to do. And then the potential of you could have fiddle yard type areas here, and it could link in, etc. So yeah, those are just some provisional ideas for the baseboards, so, and how they could go.
From many of the city's great buildings. Quite so, Mistress Fenimore.
Another part of the criteria of what I wanted to do with this layout is, as I build them in modules that can easily be stored, and I can build them to a good, hopefully a very good scenic standard, then I want to be able to run those as well. I know I certainly appreciate running the trains in the garden, and certainly I've had lots of comments about the lighting that you get from running trains in the garden and how it looks good to show them in the natural light, and also it's quite enjoyable, and making the videos is enjoyable as well, and if you enjoy watching them, then that adds an additional element of satisfaction as well. So really the other criteria is that when I build these scenic sections, I want to be able to build some kind of construction, a non-scenic construction that just allows me to run trains in a loop to basically get those trains running through the scenic sections. Now, what I would say is the lockdown layout that I've built, if you've not seen that, just have a look at those videos. That was just a project to see what I could build with basic materials, cardboard, garden materials, etc. Okay, what I want out of this one is a bit more running reliability and a bit more so I can keep things on the level. So these will be built of wood construction, even the parts that are just going to send the trains around to run through the scenic display again. Okay folks, welcome back. So basically just to give you a bit of an idea of where I'm thinking of going with this. Okay, so some of you will have seen my scenic inspiration and planning video, number 1, where I looked at rivers and embankments, and that was in an area of greenbelt land in a kind of suburban area. Okay, so what I was thinking of recreating something similar, not an exact copy, not operationally an exact copy or anything like that, but something similar to that feature in this area here, which may need to take more baseboards along here as well. What I'm also thinking is completely changing the scene here with a scenic break, so that here I've got more of a town city type line where I've got running lines that are going to run on brick built structures, viaducts, etc. And covering that kind of area around here. So it's a completely different scene altogether. Potentially going to incorporate station area, some of these as well. So that will explain a bit more about that later on. The idea is as well is to incorporate a TMD, which may well be in this kind of area, on these kind of boards and part of the industrial area. You can obviously have TMDs in more of a rural area, or an area where perhaps where it's not, the land is not as expensive, as happens a lot, or you can have obviously your TMDs in more built up areas like Longsight, for instance. Okay, the other idea of what I wanted to incorporate into it was a heritage line, okay, similar to kind of the East Lancs Railway. So I've uploaded some videos of the East Lancs as well, so please check that out, and it'll give you a flavour of some of my inspiration for the heritage line. Also, what I'm going to be doing as well is another scenic inspiration video as soon as we get the weather, hopefully before the new layout build starts. And that will cover some of the Peak District lines, particular some of the quarry areas as well of the Peak District. So I'm thinking Peak Forest. It won't be a full build of that. I just want to cover the scenic sections of line that you get around the Buxton area. Okay, so that's probably going to be in this kind of area as well. So there's a lot to do. I'm sure anyone who's planned a layout knows that that is quite a big layout to plan. But my idea, as I say, is to just do it in scenic sections. And due to some of the track purchasing limitations that we've got at the moment, I was looking at doing the first section of this kind of area. So that the area that relates to that first scenic planning and scenic inspiration video. Okay, welcome back folks. So the third area that I wanted to have a look at was running lines. Okay, so what I mean by that is the number of lines that I'm going to have, the active main lines, and in particular how they interact between the different baseboards. So for this layout, I want to have 4 running lines. Now that will allow me to have a number of trains on display and potentially four trains running at any one time, some slow speed, some quicker speed. So I don't need to know the full way that those running lines are going to work on the different baseboards, but what I really need to know is in particular how the running lines are going to interact with the other baseboards. So on here where the line is going to come in and link, and where another line is going to come in, and where those lines are potentially going to exit. So once I've got that, I know I can measure them exactly where they are, exactly where they come in, and then I can start to forget about the rest of it for now and really just look at building the individual baseboards and how I'm going to design those. The other thing I wanted to look at in terms of the running lines was what we're going to do with those and what options we've got. So as I say, the 4 running lines in the industrial area here, or the town city type area, I think it would be very nice to have those lines together for quite a bit. So you're going to have 4 lines together at any one point. I think that would look really effective and would be quite prototypical really for towns and cities. I'm thinking some of the lines that you've got around Manchester where you can have 4, 6, even more lines coming into major stations. So that would be good to create for that area there, would make it look really good. However, for some of the other areas, the more rural, I may not want all of those lines together. So I may want to change it. So using this scenic break, I may want those lines to come in separately. Another thing is that those lines where they cross, they may exit at different points around here. Now, that may work well here, but then there may be other bits. So the Peak District, I don't want 4 lines around there. I may only want 1 line on display. So it may be a case of hiding some of the lines around as well, so that we can just make that more prototypical for the kind of single track lines that you may get, or double track lines around those kind of areas. Okay folks, so the other thing, while we're just talking about the running lines and the way that works, obviously that's going to come into what era you were modelling as well. So for instance, on the scenic planning and inspiration video number 1 I've done, this is the River Mersey, and what you've got a situation where you've got a lower level line that would go over to Stockport in this direction, and you'd get a higher level line as well that would cross. So effectively you've got 2 bridges, 2 rail bridges, with this line going over the top and this one going underneath, and both would cross the river at any one time. Now back in the day, in the days of steam, all of these would be double track lines. There'd be big Hattons Mersey engine sheds over here, and you'd have all sorts going on. Now sadly the bridges have been removed, both of them. I can just about remember one of them as a kid when it was being removed. However, you do still have double lines here that are active that go to the Peak Forest area. Okay, that was originally a double track line. Now it is just a single track freight line. So part of my thoughts really is in hiding some of the lines, is it's going to make it a bit more prototypical to a modern era, where you may have a track bed for 2 lines, which is now one of them isn't used for saving cost, etc., where you'll just have the more limited freight traffic using the 1 single line. So that's what I'm going to be looking at incorporating as much as I can for this kind of area, where I'll be hiding some of the running lines as well, just to give that better, more realistic scenic effect. Okay guys, welcome back. Hope you're still with me. If you are, you're very patient, because obviously the planning can be both an enjoyable subject, or if it's not quite your bag and you're someone who likes to just get on with it, then it could be potentially a bit of a tedious subject as well. So hopefully the bits in between just liven that up a little bit. Anyway, let's have a look. What have we got next? Okay, so vertical extent. That's something I came up with thinking about the fact that I want the lines to run on different levels. That will facilitate the river crossing with the double bridge at different heights that I'm looking at doing. I also think it adds an element of interest, and it's often quite prototypical as well, where you get areas where one line's much higher up or slightly higher up than another one. It happens a lot around Manchester, so yeah, that's what I'd like to do as well. Okay, so for this example, when I'm looking at the individual modules, I'm going to be looking at not only where they come in laterally into the baseboard, but also what height they're going to be and how I want to present that. So if I want a higher level one, it's going to potentially, not always the case, sometimes it may work the other way, but what I really want is the higher level one towards the back, so it's going to be better to view. So I've got the higher one towards the back. Obviously here it's going to cross the lower level one, but I need to factor that in as well. I need to work out, before I start laying the track, what height difference I need to give things like the carriage clearance, what height would look realistic for, you know, in some ways prototypical to the real structure. And also one big thing to be mindful of here is think very carefully about the heights that you're going to use. I've been caught out by this one before in a previous layout. What I'm talking about is where you think, well, I'd like to build a nice visual feature, say for instance a viaduct that may be quite tall, and what you do is you may be in a situation where you've laid baseboards on 2B1 on the floor, a floor level loft layout as I've had before, and then you think I'd like to make a nice viaduct, but you've not got the vertical extent going down, so to speak. So you're limited, so you have to kind of dig down higher than the eye level. So really what you want to be doing is keeping whatever height you've got the track bed at, making sure that it's high enough up to cover the kind of features that you want. Okay, so what I've done in the past is I've had it like this, and then I've realised that's only on 2B1, and I want to build a viaduct into it. Well, I can't go down there, I'm sort of limited. So yeah, that's one worth thinking about. So I want to make sure that the height I've got here is going to be sufficient to cover some of the more impressive scenic features I'm thinking of building around this kind of area as well. So that's just one to think about. Okay, on the subject of vertical extent, the other thing I want to think about there is gradients. Okay, so working out what the limiting factor is for the locomotives and how long trains I want to have and how steep and what their capabilities are. So I'm not too worried about that just at the moment, but that certainly will factor in is a work out how I'm going to kind of get the two lines, the two main running lines, to interact with each other. There is the option to keep them separately and run them completely separately, but operationally that's perhaps not as interesting as having some ability to change them and lift them up. So yeah, work out that a bit in the future as well. In terms of the gradients and the differences of getting the trains to different levels, where that will have an impact here, is obviously to get a train up from one level to another, that's going to take a certain distance. So it's no good having my locomotives running so high here where I want them both to be at the same level here. So that certainly takes some thinking about as well. Okay, the other consideration I've got, number 5, is fiddle yards or other options. What I'd like to do with this one is really have as many of the trains on display as I can do. That would be good. But also it may be that I need to build a fiddle yard as well, just to sort of increase the capacity a little bit. Certainly if I wanted to run it in 2 eras, as in present day and sort of 80s, 90s, you'd certainly need a fiddle yard to keep some of your various coaching stock and wagons and what have you. But other than that, part of my criteria, what I'd like to do is have trains as you would get on the real line, where they're waiting at signals or they're waiting in passing loops. So I'll need to think about that in terms of how much space I give for the locomotives to keep a full train within a passing loop, if I'm going to do that round here, etc. Okay folks, so if you've watched all the way to this point, then thanks very much for watching. I hope that's been of some use for you. If you've got any questions at all, as I say, I'm no expert, but I'll certainly do my best to answer them if you leave them in the comments section below. Also, if you've liked this video, it is a bit different to some of the others I've done, so it would be really useful if you've enjoyed it to give it a thumbs up and any comments on it, and that will give us an idea of where I go, whether I do some more as well. It may be that the next one, as I say, this is just giving you an idea, and by no means this probably won't happen. It was just a case of looking at how different layers and different baseboards could fix together potentially. But what I'll do on the next one, if it goes down well and you find that it's been useful, is I will do more of a detailed planning one, just covering the scenic baseboards I'm going to do as a part one. And then the idea is, as those progress and I complete those, I can also then do the individual baseboards I do, say, for part two. So if you think that would be interesting and useful, then as I say, give us a thumbs up. If you want to be made fully aware of every new development I do with the layout, and all of the other things I'm going to be doing as well, then obviously just subscribe with that notification bell, and that will let you know of any other releases as I do them. Okay, so coming next, I'm going to be, when this weather improves, which hopefully, looking at the forecast, it looks like it might be a bit better weekend. I'm going to be doing another garden running session with the lockdown layout, and that one will be for the locomotive. I've just reviewed the rail freight distribution, class 47, the Sapper. So really looking forward to getting that one out, and I think that's going to look great on the layout when we've got the weather. Also to come, I've got another scenic inspiration and layout planning series, and that one's going to be looking at the Peak District and some of the quarry lines around Buxton. So really looking forward to do that one. Obviously I'm going to do that in line with the guidelines for exercise, and just making sure that I stay safe with that and avoid crowded areas. So yeah, and also I will be doing in the future as well, having a look at some of the other areas, so some of the more industrial lines around Manchester, but I think that's going to come a bit later on, and also potentially looking at some of the areas around Stockport as well. Okay, so yeah, that's enough of me waffling on, so hopefully you've enjoyed it. Any suggestion, any feedbacks, really much appreciated. But I'll wrap it up for now, and in the meantime, enjoy your weekends, keep safe, and bye for now.